I know. See, I'm looking for the exceptions. You have to, if you can use language, you really need to convert it into mathematics.
Yep.
Gurty Beats.
I want to tell you a story about how the world ends. I want to tell you a story about how the world ends. I want to tell you a story about how the world ends.
When our ancestors left Egypt and had to make unleavened bread for the first time, were they upset about eating unleavened bread as we know what bread is with yeast and leaven? Like, for instance, you get a white loaf of bread, it's sliced, it's full of yeast, and it's good. Was that really something similar to what our ancestors experienced? Or were they upset because their unleavened bread wasn't Indian bread? This bread right here.
What is this place?
This was their burial ground.
Whose burial ground?
Micmac Indians. This was their burial ground.
Whose burial ground?
Micmac Indians. Micmac Indians. I brought you here to bury Ellen's cat.
Why, for God's sake? I said, why, Judd?
I had my reasons. Soil's thin, but you'll manage. I'm gonna sit over yonder now to smoke. I'd help you, but you gotta do it yourself. Each buries his own.
So let's look into different stories of floods and Babel, the Tower of Babel. I also want to take a moment before we start onto this is to remind Israel, the Israelites, that everyone has a creation story, okay? And everyone has a history. And some people have a written history, and some people have a verbal history. Now, the Native Americans' history does not match at all our history that's written in Scripture as far as being the children of the Most High. Okay? Oh, their history is verbal mostly. I have a feeling that some of it is written. But neither case do they share the same chosen history as the children of the Most High. So again, you can't force a round peg into a square hole. You hear that?
And this is the last time I can talk to the top half?
Yes. The truck is the only thing that is holding her together.
Let's say this is her bottom half. Can I squeeze in a few minutes with that?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Let me explain.
Tom.
Men, you hear that? Okay? Our men need to stop putting a round peg into a square hole because it's not going to fit. Okay. So over here we have one version of Cherokee origin story recounted in 1896 has both a tower narrative and a flood narrative. When we lived beyond the great waters, there were 12 clans belonging to the Cherokee tribe. And back in the old country in which we lived, the country was subject to great floods. So that the course of time we held a council and decided to build a storehouse reaching to heaven. The Cherokees said that when the house was built and the floods came, the tribe would just leave the earth and go to heaven. We commenced to build a great structure. And when it was towering into one of our highest or one of the highest heavens, the great powers destroyed the apex, cutting it down to about half of its height. But as the tribe was fully determined to build to heaven, they were determined for safety. They were not discouraged. It's to repair the damage done by the gods. Okay. Finally, they completed the lofty structure and considered themselves safe from the floods. But after it was completed, the gods destroyed the high part again. And when they determined to repair the damage, they found that the language of the tribe was confused or destroyed. Does that sound familiar, Israel? Okay? Their story totally matches the Tower of Babel story in Genesis. Okay? Now, traces of somewhat similar story have been reported among the Tharu of Nepal and northern India. Let's see up here, Arizona. Still another story attributed to the Tohono O'odham people holds that Montezuma escaped a great flood, then became wicked and attempted to build a house reaching to heaven, but the Great Spirit destroyed it with thunderbolts. Okay, let's check this out. Various traditions similar to the Tower of Babel are found in Central America. Some writers connected the Great Pyramid of Cholula to the Tower of Babel. The Dominican friar Diego Duran reported hearing an account about the pyramid from a 100-year-old priest of Cholula shortly after the conquest of Mexico. He wrote that he was told when the light of the sun first appeared in the land, giants appeared and set off in searching of the sun. Not finding it, they built a tower to reach the sky. An angry god of the heavens called up the inhabitants of the sky, who destroyed the tower and scattered its inhabitants. The story was not related to either a flood or the confusion of languages, although Fraser connects its construction and the scattering of the giants with the Tower of Babel. Another story attributed by the native historian Fernando de Alva Cortez Extuteli to the ancient Toltec states that after men had multiplied following a great deluge, they erected a tall zaculi or tower to preserve themselves in the event of a second deluge. However, their languages were confounded and they went to separate parts of the earth. Bada bing, bada boom. All right. Somebody talk to me. I want to see your comments flood in, please. All right.
Children have fought wars. They've built nations. They are strong and have courage. Don't treat them any less than that because they're young.
Okay, Taylor. Okay. Huh? Okay. You can stay in the house, okay? You can have my aura, my spirits, the ghosts, the whole deal. The whole casaba. But keep your hands off my car, okay? Hands off. It's worse than it was before.
Car's still angry, huh?
Angry? That car is pissed.
God is in his holy tent. Earthly thoughts be silent now, while with reverence we ascend and his presence now.
Come on, Caroline, it's raining. Come on. What's wrong?
He is with us now and
Caroline, come on, let's go.
as we call upon his name, aiding every good endeavor, guiding upward every aim.
You're getting soaked. Come on, sweetie.
Can we help you?
Haven't I seen you somewhere before?
That is possible. I get around. I love getting around. Love talking to people, even on a rainy day. Dog shedding? Hi.
Hi. I saw you at the shopping mall.
Sure you did. I remember your little angel here. Allow me to introduce myself, Henry Kane.
Mom?
You know, I gotta tell you, we've had enough of door-to-door salesmen, if you don't mind.
Reverend Kane, what I sell is free. Mind if I come in and talk to you about it?
Mom, I don't feel well.
You know, I gotta tell you, maybe we just talk from here, all right?
Come inside, baby. I want to take your temperature. Come on, Ron.
I'm glad we have this opportunity to talk with your family out of the way. Because I believe you have a problem here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I believe there's an Indian living here with you.
Taylor.
So that's what he calls himself now. You are in danger.
What do you mean?
I'm with an organization whose concern is families like your own, families in crisis that are preyed upon by charlatans with fake magic and false solutions. Now, I don't expect you to believe me now, but let me come in and talk to you about it.
Oh, this is crazy. This is nuts.
Please, open your heart and your mind to what I'm saying. He is dangerous. Strong hold on this family. Who do your wife and children turn to with their problems? They turn to him. Now, don't they? They don't trust you anymore. What you fear is that you're not man enough to hold this family together.
How do you know?
Because I'm smart. And I'm your friend. And I know what you are thinking. Now, let me in. Let's talk about it. Let me in.
You're my friend.
Let me in.
Daddy?
Now, before it's too late. You're gonna die in there! All of you! You are gonna die!
Get the hell out of here.
Sorry to see you're still unconvinced. Pleasure visiting with you as we call upon his name, aiding every good intent, guiding us toward every end.
Good.
Who was that?
There was him.
Him?
What are you talking about?
Testing your power. He comes in many forms, but that was him. Now you're hooked. You're on the path of a warrior.
Hooked? Hey, wait, Taylor, what are you talking about?
Your confrontation with him was a drain on your power. We don't have much time. We must prepare.
Prepare?
There once was a serpent who only traveled one direction.
Always forward, never backward. Until one day, the serpent came upon a demon.
The demon cursed the serpent, driving him insane, causing him to eat his own tail. The serpent was blind.
But there were those who could see, who knew the serpent's true path.
But there were those who could see, who knew the serpent's true path.
So they created a weapon to destroy the demon.
They hid the weapon in the snake's den, where he waited for his madness to end.
But it never did. For the seers discovered that the only one who could wield the weapon was the demon itself.
And so the serpent was doomed to circle in madness forever.
Caught that, huh? I'm not really supposed to say anything about it.
Hey, I can keep a secret.
Really, it's just like an old scary story.
Really, it's just like an old scary story.
Well, I want to know.
Okay, did you know Quileutes are supposedly descended from wolves?
What? Like wolves?
Yeah.
Like real wolves?
Well, that's the legend of our tribe.
Okay.
I'm sure this is okay. I really hate being a party crasher.
Technically, you're a council meeting crasher. See? The council leaders, Dad, Quill's grandpa, and Sue Clearwater. She took over for Harry when he died.
Okay, I should not be here.
You're okay. I mean, they thought it would be good for you to hear the histories.
Histories? The tribe's histories? Aren't they secret?
We all got a role to play. And you're part of this. I mean, it's the first time Seth, Leah, and Quillo hear him too. But you are the first outsider. Ever.
If I had known that, I would have, better dressed better.
Jake!
Hey.
It's about time you got here. Paul's been hoovering the grub, but I saved you some burgers.
Good looking out, bro. Belle, this is Seth Clearwater, Leah's brother. Newest member of the pack.
Newest, bestest, brightest.
And slowest.
Come on, your dad's about to start.
The Quileutes have been a small tribe from the beginning. But we have always had magic in our blood. We were great spirit warriors.
And hoist the colors high. Heave ho, thieves.
Shapeshifters. They transform to the powerful wolf.
I'm all right. Until I'm alone. And lately, that's all the time. Jacob's gone. He's hunting Victoria. And Charlie's hunting Jacob. And you're gone. And so is Edward.
I guess I'm hunting Jacob too.
And there's just nothing now.
You got something, Harry?
Nope, nothing.
But I realize where I have to go. What I have to do to see him again.
So this whole time, we've been played by the natives and the Europeans.
This enabled us to scare off our enemies and protect our tribe. One day, our warriors came across a creature. It looked like a man, but it was hard like stone and cold as ice. Sharp teeth finally tore it apart, but only fire would completely destroy it. They lived in fear that the cold man was not alone. And they were right. She took her vengeance out on the village. Our elder chief, Taha Aki, was the only spirit warrior left to save the tribe after his son was killed. Taha-Aki's third wife could see that he would lose. The third wife was no magical being, no special powers but one. Courage. Third wife's sacrifice distracted the cold woman long enough for Taha-Aki to destroy her. She saved the tribe. Over time, our enemies have disappeared, but one remains. The cold ones. Our magic awakens when they're near, and we sense it now. We feel the threat in our blood. Something terrible is coming. And we must all be ready. All of us.
And so in the first world, we began to grow and gain greater awareness and greater intelligence as we progressed. And as we progressed, we became fully aware that the holy people would refer to us constantly as their children. So we became fully aware that we were their offspring. But also there were 4 other beings of awareness that were in our midst that were not claimed by the holy people as their children. These beings would eventually become vegetation, insect, birds, and animals. These were also there with us. But we were fully aware of those beings and their presence. But we all grew and gained in awareness as we progressed through the first world until we could grow and gain entrance into the second world. The second world is the blue world, or the turquoise world. It was that in this existence we are told that we took on a spirit form, that we took on an actual form that was a spirit. In our spirit form, we progressed through the second world, gaining greater awareness and greater intelligence. But we had retained as well all that we had gained as awareness and intelligence as we had progressed through the first world. And as we continued to grow and gain in awareness and progress to the second world, we gained greater understanding and awareness and intelligence. And it was that when we were able to, then we progressed to the next world, which is the third world. The third world is the yellow world. And the yellow world is where we are at today. This is the third world. You might think of the first world as a single-dimensional existence, and then the second world as a two-dimensional existence, and then here we are in a three-dimensional environment. And this is the third world, and it is the yellow world. The yellow world for many, many reasons. But basically, the yellow sun, or the glow of the moon and the stars, or when you make a fire in the night, it gives off the yellow glow. And then, of course, the pollen of all vegetation. We're told that the pollen is yellow. And it is that we use the corn pollen as a prayer offering. And generally carry it in a pouch. We use it as a prayer offering. But the teaching is that all life form, anything that reproduces life, that it comes from yellow pollen. So it is that we, even as beings, when you crack an egg That's the largest example I could give you about all life forms coming from the yellow pollen. And so it is that that's what we are told, that we have our origin from yellow pollen. And so the teachings that sometimes our people get confused thinking that it means the yellow corn pollen is where we come from. But that's sometimes misunderstood as a teaching. But it is that in this world, this is the third world, the yellow world, everything in this world is set for us based on the sacred number 4. And it is that as all things are set for us based on the sacred number 4, when we arrive from the previous world as a spirit being, we enter this physical form that we are here at the top of the head. And it is at the top of the head that we have this spiral. Anoseka is where the root of the hair is into the skull, and then it lays into the continual growth direction. And this is where we are told that the spirit entered this physical form. This here area on the top of the head, the spiral, is a sacred area. But this spiral is not only found on our head, but it's also found on our fingertips. These are markings that are our identification markings. It is the markings, that the holy people recognize us by. And it is that because we have these sacred markings on our hand, we are never to strike our children, never to strike another dene with the hand.
This is my flagship attempt.
And if there was a need to administer some type of corporal punishment to a child, it was that you would go out and you would harvest strands of yucca core and then tie them together. Or if you needed to use a branch of a tree or something, that you would then take that walk and then you would harvest what you needed. You would tell the vegetation that you were harvesting from how you were going to use it to administer punishment. And then, of course, when you return with the yucca, 4 strands of yucca tied together, and you administered that whipping, you were to hit the legs. And you would only do it 4 times or 8 times, but never more than 12. And it was then after you'd done that, then you would take the yucca back out there and you would thank the vegetation of the yucca for using it to help you administer punishment. But many times you would, on your way to harvest the yucca, you would think of other ways to counsel your children so you wouldn't have to administer that physical punishment. And it was a good policy to follow. And of course the markings on the hands, there were always ways to preserve it, and so it's identified by this drawing of the spiral in the continual growth direction. And then of course when our spirit entered this physical form here at the top of the head, the sacred spot, we let out this cry from an emotional self. We become an emotional being for the very first time with that first cry. And that first cry is sort of over here on the side of fear or discomfort. And then of course as we let out that cry, somebody picked us up, rocked us, fed us, cleaned us, made us comfortable. And we become a thinking being for the very first time, we are told. And then of course as we begin to use that ability to think, we become aware of our physical environment and our physical self. And so we are told we are 4 beings in one. We arrive as a spirit being, we become an emotional being, a thinking being, and then finally a physical being. So we are four beings in one. And then the teachings are that as a being with four sacred areas of us, that we are to continually grow in those four areas of our being, in this the third world, in the yellow world. So everything is based on the sacred number 4 for us, so that we can learn how to live in the next world, which is the fourth world. It is that we must grow continually spiritually, that we must grow continually emotionally, that we must grow continually mentally, that we must grow continually greater aware of our physical environment and our physical self. And so at an early age, we are taught these things. There are ceremonies that are performed for a young woman, a young girl when she becomes a woman, that lasts 4 days. The first day is the spiritual teaching involved and received from the elder women. The second day is the teaching of the emotional self, also received from the elder women or the relatives. That might even be including the male relatives. And then the third day would be the teachings of the need to learn and to gain knowledge of all of the various things of a person and individual's environment. And then finally, of course, to be aware of your physical self and how you conduct yourself in the eyes of your relatives and in the outside world. That you work to remain healthy, you have to work and do labor. And so the traditional teachings at the end of the fourth day, of course, you take on the full meaning of what it is that one of the deities experienced as a woman, and that's the one that we refer to as changing woman, or Stanaplehe, where at the end of 4 days that you have received all that she had received as an individual, female. And so that's why that they can provide blessings to all of her relatives when she goes outside and they cut the cake, which is cooked in the ground, and it is laid out and poured into the corn husk that is laid in the continual growth direction. And so it is that when she stands there, she can provide blessings for all of her relatives and for strangers and for all of the people of the world, because she has taken on the full meaning of the teachings of Asana Plehe, or changing woman. Now that's the female. It's a very gentle experience. The boy, when he becomes a man, that's a whole different ceremony. And that is that it's a sweat lodge ceremony. In a traditional setting, it was just the male relatives that would be in attendance. And so it is that it's understood that this is a coming of age ceremony for this young man, that he's no longer a boy. Now he has the responsibilities to grow and gain knowledge so he can someday provide for a family. And so all of the men harvest strands of yucca. Some might have 4, some might have 8, some might have 12. But they tie it together, of course, in the bundle. And as part of the sweat lodge ceremony, where you go in 4 times and come out after singing 4 songs to cleanse the spirit, the emotion, the mind, and the physical form, that when they enter the sweat lodge, they switch the boy with the strands of yucca, and everybody, you can lay on 4 whipping or 8 lickings or 12, and it's a very painful experience for the traditional setting where the youth experiences this ceremony. But it is to teach a young man that if he does not provide spiritual training and does not attend to the spiritual welfare of his family, the holy people will inflict great pain and great misery on you if you fail. And so therefore learn that this physical pain that you are feeling is nothing to what the holy people can administer as pain, where it is a spiritual pain and an emotional pain and mental pain and physical pain. All of this combined against you if you do not learn the traditional ways and provide your family in the future with traditional teachings. And of course, traditional teaching is that the young man learned 4 ceremonies. That as he learned those 4 ceremonies, then he could be eligible to be given a wife. And in the traditional days and traditional past, that it was not that the young man would go out and seek out his spouse, and there was no dating or courting. It was that the families that would organize and approach each other. The young man, when he became age of 24 perhaps, that he had learned the 4 ceremonies that he needed to know, that the uncle and the mother would get together and they would identify some clan group that this young man could marry into. And if they had a young woman over there that was of age, then they would approach that family and arrange for marriage between the boy and the girl. Generally, the girl was older than 16 years old, and perhaps 18 or 19, and she would be offered up to families, and the arrangements would be made in the traditional way. This would be maybe the first time that young man and that young woman sat near each other. It was in the traditional way when such arrangements were made. Was that all of the families would come together and the ceremony would be conducted in a kokan, or kokan, as we would call it. The boys' relatives being on the south side and then the girl family on the north side. But in the actual setting, the girl would sit with the boy's family and the boy would sit with the girl's family, and it was in essence saying, we offer you our son, or we offer you our daughter. And so when the marriage was completed, it was the families were married through their children. And traditional marriages where a divorce hardly ever occurred. Because in those days, of course, the only thing that the man brought into the family was his medicine bundle and his saddle. That was probably his only property. It was that he was responsible for the spiritual welfare and the woman would be responsible for the physical welfare. And so to her belonged all of the property, the home, the livestock, and even the children. And the only reason for divorce back in those days was if the man did not provide spiritual training and attended to the spiritual welfare of the family.
There it is. What do you think?
You already know what I think. Is Mama gonna visit?
Maybe you'll see her for Christmas.
John James?
Yes? How did you know who I was?
Oh, I read your book twice. I'm kind of a fan.
Well, it's better to meet a fan than a critic.
Come on, Sam. Let's go exploring. Where? Everywhere. Wait up, Blue! What is it, Daddy?
I don't know. The realtor never said anything about it.
I don't know. The realtor never said anything about it.
Have you seen Louisa? Louisa? Louisa, is everything all right?
Your daughter, is she changing?
What do you mean?
Kids have a way of coping with change, sometimes better than adults.
Did you make this?
I don't know what that is.
You were holding it last night. Everything's gonna be okay. Louisa, was that you? I don't want you playing out at the Mound anymore.
I think something bad is gonna happen.
I have to know if my family is safe. Sam! We're leaving, Louisa.
A father will do anything for his daughter, even the worst things.
I'm your new daughter. Come play with me.
Make long story short, when I was over in Europe and we had dealt with some of these, I came back from this trip where the big Canaanite altar had been done, and I just had been gone for 3 months. That whole trip was a 3-month ordeal, and I was ready to make a beeline home and take some rest. And my wife and children had been over with me for part of it. They had come back to Oklahoma, and I was missing my family. I just wanted to get off the plane, and I had a car in New York because my brother lives there, and we had drove out there to visit with him and some friends. And I just wanted to make a beeline home in my car and not stop for anything but gas. When I landed in New York, the Holy Spirit said to me, I know you want to get home. I know you're missing your family. But I need you to do one more thing before you go. And he said, the timing is important. Before you go back to Oklahoma, go down to Jekyll Island, Georgia.
Jekyll
And
Island.
I said, Lord, I don't even know, I knew something about Jekyll Island. I had looked at some of the financial issues in the 80s and 90s. I was looking at some of the spiritual applications to financial things, but I really was not up to speed on the history of Jekyll Island. I had just heard it from something. I'd not even read the book that's called The Creature of Jekyll Island. I'd not even read that book, but I was aware of something about Jekyll Island and financial stuff. So I went in my brother's house, got my computer out, and I just, got on the internet and typed in Jekyll Island, and it's like, what's going on with Jekyll Island? And was praying and asking the Lord, why do I need to go there? And he said, when you get there, I will explain to you what you need to do. But he just told me, he says, go to the island and plan to spend. It's not that far from New York, but he said, I need you to tarry for a day or two and listen to me. I'll tell you what to do. So I discovered when I got online that the Jekyll Island Club, which was this historical, multi-millionaires country club that had been built in the turn of the century, it had just been remodeled and reopened. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And immediately the Spirit of the Lord said, that's where I want you. Book a room there.
And so I just booked me a room for that night, then got in the car and headed that way. And thank you for your time. So we started talking. He was, of course, started out talking about the financial stuff, because this Jekyll Island is where the Federal Reserve banking system was birthed and conceived. And at one time, when it was functioning in the 1900s up to the 20s and 30s, some say 1/3, some say 2/3 of the world's wealth would vacation on that island. It was the highest conglomeration of wealth in a single place very often anywhere in the world back in the turn of the century. So it just seems like a little island that's not anything significant at all now, but it's amazing to see the financial side of the history of that spot. And so I'm sitting there looking at some of the things that he's telling, just thinking about some of the things he's telling me. We went out and walked around, and he showed me some of the cottages that had been restored, and the club itself, and the tennis courts, and they had a pier where the boats would come up, and he's just kind of showing me the grounds, and then we go to the museum. And he's talking a lot about the financial stuff and the guys that built it, and each cottage was marked and named. Some of them had been restored, some of them didn't exist anymore, but they had like a sign that this is where this one was, and that one was built by J.P. Morgan, that one was Rockefeller's, and that one was they had each one of them named. Well, they're all kind of native names, and then they're all got some kind of a plaque on who the financial mogul was that had built them. And they're not really elaborate, luxurious mansions. They're just simple cottages for the most part, which was kind of interesting to know that the richest people in the world built them, and they were very low-key and almost like a cabin in the woods instead of a luxurious house like you'd expect. And they all had Indian names. So I started asking him about the Indian history of the island, and he lit up. He just was like, that's what he really wanted to talk about, because he loved the Indian history. And so he takes me back to the museum, and he said, we got a lot of stuff on the Indians. He said this was actually like the government main community for a tribe of Indians that don't exist anymore. That tribe was called the Timucas. And I said, well, that's interesting. My name's Tim. And anyway, I didn't know anything about the Timucas. I'm from Oklahoma. I've learned a lot of Native history, and I have some Native bloodline, but I did not know anything about the Timucas. So I just asked him, please tell me everything that you can tell me about them. There's something about the natives that I feel like I need to know. So he said, well, the Jekyll Island Club was actually built on top of everything that the Indians had. So they just kind of wiped the village out and built the club on top of it. So wherever the chief's house was, there was a cottage now. Wherever the council house was, there was now the Jekyll Island Hotel. And he said everything that's built and visible today is actually sitting right on top of something that was significant in the Indian village when it existed. So he said the fact that this whole place had to go into ruins and then be rebuilt and become an archaeological state park, he said it actually helped us identify the native history because the club itself had almost erased that. And so I said, well, let's look at the museum. I want to see some of the Indian stuff. So we're looking at arrowheads and spear tips and, just artifacts that they had found and pottery shards and things and seashells that they had had. And he's showing me all their stuff in the museum. He shows me some fragments of a weapon that was like an unusual bow. And when I say unusual, I mean that it was like a double curved bow. And that was a very unusual shape of a bow for a native tribe. I had never seen that shape before with an American Indian tribe. And I've seen a lot of bows and arrows. So I asked him, I said, this seems unusual. I've not seen this before. In Oklahoma, every native tribe, the bows would look like a single bow or just a single curve. I said, this is quite extraordinary, especially as far back as this tribe was. So he said, yeah, we found a lot of weapon-type artifacts that we've not seen with other tribes. And I said, well, how do you know these were Native Americans? Maybe they were from somewhere else. He said, oh, no. They were the Timucas because they're well established along the Florida and Georgia coast, and he said we got a lot of stuff in 3 or 4 states about them, and they were quite prolific at one time. So he said, we know they're Native Americans. I said, well, all right, what else you got? He said, well, we got some skeletons. He said, do you want to see the bones? And I said, well, yeah. That sounds, you don't get to see a skeleton very often. I said, are they where we can actually see them, or are they buried? He said, no, they're visible. So they had a burial site that they had been very respectful for when they built the museum. When they found a burial site, they didn't move the bones. They left them where they were, and they just uncovered them to where they were visible, and then they built the museum on top of it. They did basically the same thing with the museum that the Jekyll Island guys had done with their houses. They put a piece of plexiglass over the burial site so you could see it, but they were still trying to respect where the bones were and not move them. And so I'm looking at 4 skeletons of the Timucua chiefs. And they knew they were chiefs just from different things that were buried with them. So all of a sudden I look and I realize, man, these guys are really tall. And I commented to the guy that, how tall are these guys? They look unusually large. And he said, yeah, they're all about 8 or 8.5 foot tall. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem like a normal Native American, especially the tribes that I'm familiar with. He said all the Timucas were unusually tall, even the women. And he said we found other skeletons and parts of bones out in the grounds, and he said we've got pretty good evidence that nearly all of them were extraordinarily tall. And I said, well, what is how do you explain that in relation to other tribes on the Atlantic coast who were not? He said, I don't know. It is an unusual anomaly. He said, oh, by the way, I've got a painting that you might want to see. It's actually the copy of the original. We've got it under lock and key. But he said, I got a painting that actually shows the Indians from a group of French colonists that came to the United States before it was the U.S. This was right after Columbus. He said that it was the first colony of French folks that came over to try to establish a colony on the coast. And he said they landed in Jekyll Island, and they had some interaction with these Indians, and then they got so appalled by what they saw and witnessed that they fled at night and ended up in San Augustine, Florida, and established that city. So I said, were they the Huguenots who were the French group that established San Augustine? He said, yes. I said, well, I'd like to see that painting then. So he pulls that out. I'm looking at it, and it shows the Indians and all their regalia, and they're dancing around and having some kind of a ceremony, and it's got the fire, and it's a typical, either they're having a party or they're having a war scene, and it has some things with the weapons. So I said, gosh, this has got some weapons in it that clearly validates the archaeology that they found. And then I see an altar. And I'm going, I don't know of a Native American tribe anywhere in the country. I know some that had log houses or high places or worshipped, nature in some way, or had totem poles or that kind of stuff. But this one has a stone altar, and it looks a whole lot like the one that I had dealt with in the Middle East. And I'm looking at the picture, and I'm going, is this an altar? Is this stone like something they're sacrificing on? Because this guy's holding babies in his hands in this picture. He said, yeah, they're cutting those babies, they're hacking those babies up in that painting. And so when you look at the detail, two of the shamans or chiefs are holding a baby up by the ankles, and they're whacking their heads off and spilling the blood on this altar. Mm. And I'm like, sir, I don't want to be disrespectful of your training and archaeological understanding and history, but I don't know of any native tribe that did what I'm seeing here, unless it was an act of war. And this is really, really unusual. And I've seen this type of scene with artifacts over in the Middle East. And I've seen weapons like this over in the Middle East. I said, are you sure this is Native Americans and not some kind of colony that came from over there? And he was convinced they were native. And I said, well, I'd like to show you some things on a few websites that identify artifacts in the Middle East countries, and especially Egypt and Israel and Syria and Jordan area, and some of those spots where there's some of these ancient groups. And I said, this type of altar, this type of religious ceremony, and some of these weapons, I've seen them before over there. Well, he was quite interested in that because he loves Native American history, but he's starting to question, maybe I need to dig into this more. That was his comment. So I said, at that point, then I thought, I believe this is why I'm here. I needed to see this and hear about this. At this point, I'm not that concerned about the financial stuff anymore. I'm wanting to know, where is this altar? And so I asked him, I said, can you take me to this altar? I often pray over these things, and it's very beneficial for the land and for the country and for the people. Can I go to this altar and see it? He said, I can take you to the altar, but you can't see it. And I said, why can't I see it? Is it buried? He said, no, it's not buried, but it has a house built on top of it. I said, who would be crazy enough to build their house on top of a blood sacrifice altar? He said, well, Rockefeller was. So, nice. I just like, okay, can we go there? And he said, yeah, it's just a short walk. Come on. And we've actually, I'd already walked by it. So he said, I've got the keys. He said, normally nobody can go in. The way these things are set up, they're historical homes now. The state of Georgia owns the park. They lease it out to another group, the hotel, to run, but the houses are maintained on the National Historical Register, and they're part of the state park. So you can't go in any of them without a guided tour or permission, but you can go look in the windows and walk on the porches and walk all around them. And they're set up inside just like they were when they were actually being used back in the 20s and earlier. So we go over there, and he's got the keys, though. So we go into the house, and he takes me into the parlor, and he says, well, I know you're a praying guy, so you probably would like to have a little time to pray. He said, you're standing right on top of the altar right now. This is the room that is built on top of it. He said, I'm just going to go over here and sit down for a few minutes and read the newspaper, and I'll let you pray and do whatever you need to do.
Now, this parlor, that's where those guys, J.P. Morgan and all those guys, actually conceived of the Federal Reserve, right? Right over that
That's,
altar.
that's exactly right. It's the room that they were sitting in when they drew up the entire legislation and plan to pass it that became the Federal Reserve Act.
Wow.
So this was the conception of the Federal Reserve banking system on the parlor sitting on top of a blood sacrifice altar.
Where babies were sacrificed.
Yes. And so all of a sudden it's like, wow, no wonder our banking system has so much corruption in it, even when people want to do the right thing, you know.
No kidding.
And so, just being a banker is not an easy job, but it's like, not all of them are bad guys, but it's like, wow. And that was not what our founders set up. That took over. It usurped the authority of the way our founding fathers suggested that we bank as a country. And even the way it was passed had a lot of, things that didn't seem right about it. But the idea that it was conceived like this, I'm going, this is not just a bunch of wealthy guys that got away for vacation and came up with a profitable business plan. This has got something diabolical, something occultic about it, something evil that's wrapped up with it.
Yeah.
And so even if it had been a good idea and something beneficial for the country, which many would argue that it was, this demonic power must have gotten into it. That's what happens when an altar is not dealt with. That's what happens when God's people do not do spiritual warfare the way He tells us to.
Right.
Then we all become subject to it, because they didn't just create a bank. They created a banking system that every one of us have become subject to. So think about this. You've got money that you receive as a ministry, or that you, when you earn, I'm sure you tithe and give offerings. On your money is idolatry. It's printed right on your money.
Right.
And you're using that money. You're coming into the house of God, and you're laying that idolatrous coin or dollar bill on God's altar and saying, I'm giving you this as an offering. Well, what if the living, holy God hates it?
Wow.
We don't have a choice, because we're subject to it.
Yeah,
It's
that's why
the
they call it circulation, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're circulating a talisman that has evil attached to it right from its conception.
This is a rare view of what's inside a burial mound, which was built about 1,500 years ago. We are inside the museum in Kolomoki Mounds, Georgia, and you can see the skeletons of ancient mound builders. And let me show you the outside of the museum so you can understand what's going on here. This is the mound from the outside, and the building museum has a part of it. They excavated the mound, and we are actually looking at the inside of an ancient mound. Here you can see the layout of how a mound looks. A deep ditch in the center, and the skeletons of mound builders in different places. You can see one skeleton here, a skull there, another skeleton here, and another skull there. I'll explain the skulls without bodies in a minute, but my first reaction after seeing this was to immediately go to the front desk, and I asked them if they are the original skeletons. If they are, we can find the measurements and finally confirm that the mound builders were giants who stood over 7 feet tall. But guess what? All the original mound builder skeletons have been taken to the Smithsonian Institution, and what we see are just models, not built to scale. So the mound is real. We are actually looking into a 1,500-year-old mound. The rocks, the dirt, everything is real except the skeletons. For some strange reason, they've chosen to take the skeletons to Washington, D.C., which seems to be the repository for all mound builder skeletons. It is disappointing to learn that, but in my visit to over dozens of mounds in different states, this is the only museum that offers a look inside a mound. Now, inside the ditch in the center, you can see one skeleton. You can only see a very small portion of it, and the legs are not even shown, as though they are still in the dirt. He was the giant leader who passed away, and this is why this burial mound was built. But you may ask, if it was built solely for burying the leader, what about the other skeletons and skulls? Human sacrifice. The rest of the bodies were all killed and buried along with the giant. I'm not making this up. These are official signs that say, as a ceremony, 2 women were strangulated. The skulls belong to the strangulated women. Let's read the archaeologist's report here. Sears described a burial in Mound D that contained 5 males and 2 females. He believed 7 people were retainers to the chief or spiritual leader. So the skulls belong to the females and the complete skeletons belong to the men who were sacrificed for the giant. Here it says their sacrifice at the burial of the paramount individual implies that they stood in a socially and ritually subservient position to the paramount individual in the society which constructed Mound D. William Sears, 1956. He used the word paramount twice to describe the giant leader, which etymologically means one who stood tall. This is probably how the scene looked. Led by a new priest chief, the people formed a procession bearing the deceased leader on a log litter. 2 females, perhaps his wives, followed, prepared to sacrifice their lives. Other males for sacrifice walked behind them, leading people carrying vessels, bones, heads, and ashes. This is also the first time I've seen official signs that explicitly mention human sacrifice, and you won't find this anywhere in history books. This is what separates the giant mound builders from other Native American tribes. Throughout the history of Native American tribes, they helped each other when in drought, when in need. But the mound builders not only looked different, but they acted differently. They practiced human sacrifice, cannibalism, and took other tribes as slaves, were a dominant force that built these huge mounds. This view also gives us a good understanding of how the mounds are built. Most people think that mounds are just a pile of dirt, but you can see an arrangement of rocks all over the mound. The rocks were carefully placed along with clay to make it last forever. Understand, if the mounds were just built from dirt, they would have been washed off by now and won't last for centuries. The rocks excavated from the mound are stacked outside, and there are still burn marks on all of them. These burnt rocks is also a common feature and is found in mounds of Illinois and Ohio, confirming that it was the same people who built these mounds.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm so excited to be sharing with you the information going forward. It's been a couple of years of research that I've put together for my family, so hallelujah to the Most High and all praises to Him for allowing me to share with you, those of you who are of Yisrael, on my channel. I'm going to be, as you can see from the title, dissecting Cham. If you've never seen his name spelled like that, you don't only pronounce it as Ham, but you can also pronounce it as Cham, like people have since ancient times. We're also going to be discussing Jacob's kin. Okay, so I hope to see your questions that you might have at the end of our conversations in the comments. I truly believe many of you, and maybe not even any of you, have heard this information, and I'm glad that you're here to listen to me willingly to hear what I believe the Most High is having me press out. Okay, so we're going to be covering, like I mentioned, we are going to be covering Ham. Okay, so new people. There's many of Israelites who have discussed and covered this thoroughly. I'm going to briefly discuss who Ham is on this page that you're seeing before you. You can find other descriptions of him similarly on the Israelite channels. So Ham, who was the youngest son of Noah, also known as Shem. So that's Shem. Ham is used to describe the line of Ham since ancient times. Other names include Kim and Kim. And the pronunciation is not supposed to be like Shem. Okay? It's supposed to like or Sem. So even though it has an E or a K or whatever, you still know that is Ham. Going into Genesis 10:6 and 11:4. Ham had 4 boys: Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. So for a lot of people, outside of being, I'm a 70s child. I was born Negro, and there was no blackness on my birth certificate because no blacks back then were marked as, no Negroes back then were marked as black. We were always Negro. We always pretty much knew where we came from. So I find this walk very shockingly turned around that it's there's Israelites out there pointing to Africa and believing that you're African because you have a mama, and somewhere, if your daddy is not at home, you have a daddy. And they have grandparents. And you know that your granddad or your grandma did not come from Africa. And you know their grandparents didn't come from Africa either. So why would you even consider that you would be from Africa? Okay? But we're not just here to discuss Africa. We're here to discuss the deceivement of Ham. And the reason why I'm bringing up Africa is because Israel, you have become very protective of lands that are not of your own. When you see other nations trying to make a grab for Africa, here comes Phil from the Advice channel trying to tell you to be upset for Africa because China is involved in taking their lands. Well, I got something for you, Phil. I've got something for you, Israel, who may think that they're African. You will be shocked to find out why these land grabs are going on. And I'm here to tell you. Okay, so Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary of Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, was one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negro, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Ancient Egypt was once named Shamia and Shimea to represent Ham. Okay? So don't let, going forward, don't let Shem deceive you anymore, because they're part of Psalm 83. They are part of being confederate against you, and they're being silent against you too, not letting you know who you really are. They're over there in Africa laughing at your butt because they know. They're just not in Africa laughing either. Okay. I don't even know where to start on this page. There's so much going on. And I will tell you, my background is I woke up probably around the same time that most of you woke up on these channels. And we discovered the mystery that was hidden from us of us being the Most High's chosen. Well, there's an awful lot more hidden from us too, because Cham, as you can see from this page, has pretty much pulled the wool over our eyes. He's spread out in other places that you didn't conceive of. And some of us have conceived of, because one of the first things that I learned is that some of the people that were over here when Columbus came, they were from Ham, and we weren't believed, and we're still not believed. But you're going to believe this after we're done here. Okay, so hopefully you listen to, I made a voiceover about Tartary, and as I am building upon this, I'm hoping that I remember to upload it with this video. But really, we're going to discuss the Tartars and Tartary throughout this video if I forget to do that, if I forget to do the voice over for that. So that's why I'm mentioning that now. Let me see, get that out of there. So what you're seeing over here to the right before I begin is, you know how the talks of slavery, when you go deep into slavery and you realize that the East India Company had something to do with it, and you know that they were Dutch and they really just don't like you. Well, I'm glad I'm able to put this out then. So this is sent by the East India Company of the United Provinces. Am I saying that right? To the Grand Tartar Sham, or Emperor of China? So did I just look at that right, everyone? Sent by the East India Company. Grand Tartar Sham? But I thought Sham was Ham. Well, who could this be? This person right here is Genghis Khan, who conquered China. And he doesn't look anything like the pictures that they provide us. We're also going to see why. You're not going to believe the forward information. But let's go into Genesis 11:2. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there, and they said to one another, go to let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men built it. Okay, so let's focus on Nimrod. The story doesn't really start in the basin of the Tigris and the Euphrates, like the rest. Also in Egypt, that at the time when the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, which was a single state, united all the tribes under its scepter. In this state, the first regularly organized in the world among all the various races which populated it. The preponderance and domination first belonged to the Shemites, Cush's blood. From Cush, says Genesis, was born Nimrod, who began to be mighty on earth and was a strong hunter before the Lord. For there came the proverb, a strong hunter before the Lord, like Nimrod. The origin of his empire was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Shalem in the country of Shinar. He left this country to go to Assyria, and he built Nineveh and Rehoboth and Calach, and also Rezin. Between Nineveh and Calach, there are 4 cities. These 4 cities form the big city. Okay, let's look into the origins of the Assyrians. Okay, so first, the language of the inspired book. Several facts of capital importance emerge. For the early history of Mesopotamia, we see the Shemites of the race Ashur, constantly involved with the Cushites of Chaldea. Okay. And that is only much later, at fully historical period, that they formed in Nineveh, where they were more numerous and new state, distinct from Chaldea. Long habitation with each other explains how Assyrians and Babylonians had the same language and same culture. So do you see what long habitation will do to one's culture? This is why the Most High wanted us to be separate. So we were having long habitations, even over here. Okay, there's books. I can't really remember the name right now off the top of my head, but the book about America being something, something, something. You know what I'm talking about. I will post it as a link if I remember. But in the book, we were shown to be over here with all our blackness, and we were keeping the company of the Indians as well. They were shown with us. I think it was Tasha XI who went up to Washington and discovered that book in the Library of Congress and made it known. I thought that was so awesome, by the way. Thank you, Tasha. That was just unbelievable. Okay, so proving that one's culture and its laws can be adopted after long habitation. And nature versus nurture. So you've all heard of that. Okay. And this is a little bit nerve-wracking for me because I'm not used to speaking on slides. This is, I think, my first slide ever. And I don't know how I'm doing. I think I sound okay. Do you guys think I sound okay? But we have, again, Shem, Ham, the Tartars. What would be the relationship here if what I'm finding is true? What would be the relationship here? So in my last video, I had maps of one of the 4 biblical rivers was released. I brought out Shinar. I also found a map of Canaan and some other things. And that video only had, maybe 240 views. And it's so saddening because while you're on other channels watching people try to convince you that you're related to these Native Americans and they're feeding you the book of lies, which is, one of them is the New Testament, the other one being the Book of Mormon. And while they're feeding this to you and you're guzzling it down and they're calling out and giving acknowledgement to an idol, which is Yeshua, I don't care what color you try to make him. He's still Zeus. So while all that's happening and you're 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people into someone's channel and you're buying this, you're missing everything else. And I can prove that. So China, the area, the East Indies, is pretty much the land of Shinar, as I brought up formerly in my last video. So you have different spellings because not everyone can speak the same language. And so other languages wouldn't have spelled it, even like how China spelled it. So you're getting a little bit of what I've found over the years that people have been using to hide the fact that China is the land of Mesopotamia. And even into the area of the United States, as I formally brought out in my very early videos. And I would like to give special thanks to YouTube for blocking my videos, because this is what happened, YouTube. I had a big video on Tartary and Tartaria, and people are like, why don't you make a big video? I've made little videos, but I've not done like they think I've not done a documentary, but I surely did, and YouTube blocked it. And I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to the Most High for allowing that to happen, because if Most High, I'm sure you know, if I would have kept on going with that one, then I wouldn't have found out about the New Testament being fake. And so YouTube, bang up job. Anything else you want to do to help me? Okay. Hey, you guys. You know what it's like to have 180 comments and then most of them be blocked? You know you're onto something. So, yeah. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't go over. Did I go over this? Okay. So, let me just do this one more time. China, Shinar, all the way through, different pronunciations. It's Mesopotamia, Babylon, Lower and Lesser Tartary, Tartaria. So this is like the Tartary, the Lesser. And the day that, I was not the first person in the world to find Tartary, but I was most certainly the first Israelite to say that part of those lands over there would be our lands, because that's the lands of Shinar. And that happened here on this channel. And people denied it, but hey, you're going to see. That wasn't supposed to cover that. Okay, so I guess when you do slides, sometimes the work slides are out, I'm not sure. And I can bring up this map later, but it's supposed to show you the kingdom of Ham. Right up under there, if you kind of look good, you'll see that's the kingdom of Ham, which is Tartaria, that they are on top of the horse expressing. Now let's talk Prester John. I know you guys are going to say, but another channel already brought up Prester John. Okay, that's great. I love it. Sometimes the Most High gives me things and I have to let it come out in other ways because that's what the Most High wants. I was already on various things, yes, but I knew about Prester John possibly being about King David when I made the video about, I think it was about, it was the Euphrates videos, because the information that I had, you cannot use that information that I had without knowing about him being here. And especially, he's all over this book right here. He is all up and down. Oops. He's all up and down this book in ways that you probably have never heard of. So I just wanted to show you, this is, I think it's Tibet and Mongolia. That would be considered Greater Tartaria. And then you have Lesser Tartaria down here. Hey, did you guys even know that there's movies out about Tartaria that are so old? They're, we're talking about, I think in the 30s or 40s. Yeah, 40s, I would say. They've had movies produced about Tartaria. It's just in our later time that we just didn't hear about it. All right, game over. What is this? Oh, Shinar, or Oriental Plain. Even this tree that you see here, guess what? It's called Shinar. Okay? I forget what kind of tree that is. I made a mental note of it, but that didn't stay in my head too well. But I'm going to go and look that up if I remember. I always say that I'll look it up if I remember, because I don't want you guys to hear a promise that I could forget and break. So I always say, if I remember. But yeah. All right, so this is where it got to be. It's like one thing you think you know, and you're like, oh yes, I got them right where I want them. I'm going to show my people, and it's going to be this way, and we're going to do this, and this. And then something else comes up, and you're like, okay, I gotta look at this again. And it's so unfortunate, family, that we do this to each other. But if someone has something in their head, maybe it's not quite right, then we reject them and give people time to see what they have and try to get back in line. I'm not talking about people who continuously feed you misinformation and never try to correct it or never try to listen to someone. Or they never look through the comments and think, well, they might have something. Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, I have my eyes wide open, my ears wide open as well. But there could be a slightly other way when I think about Shem and Ham. So I just wanted to say I filmed or created this video a lot earlier, many months ago, and I added on the Kingdom of Ham, and hopefully you understand, because I always go back to Southeast Asia. I tend to just try to make you guys understand that's where the 10 tribes went. So we are going to stop here because I've gone over time. I like to keep it about an hour and 30 minutes. We're much over than that. So I'll quit, but I will talk to you again soon about the Canaanites in another lesson, as well as Ham's
parentage, and we will continue this. And this is amazing news because you don't have to sit here and take it anymore. You can go to these channels and tell them to bump themselves, because they are pushing these natives as our family, as our brethren, and they are not. They've been our enemy, quietly just keeping these secrets to themselves, but they're the enemies of Israel. They've been the enemies the whole time. Just look at the lands. Just look what the Most High did to their dried up, dusty lands. That tells you the enemy. Your enemy got served, and that's why you think that they've been hurting and similar to you and are hurt. But the Most High dealt with them and punished them and dried up their lands. Just look at it. Anyhow, these are my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. If you have any hesitation, just take it up with the Most High, talk to Him, and I'm sure you'll get the answers that you need. And I love you guys. Peace out.
Doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't stop.
I told you, this is a story about how the world ends. One that begins at the end and ends at the beginning.